Have you ever wondered what it would be like to storm a medieval castle, facing towering walls, boiling oil, and a hail of arrows? Or why these stone giants stood unconquered for centuries, defying armies and time itself? Today, we're diving into the secrets of medieval fortresses, why they were nearly unbreakable, and how they shaped the world we know. Stick around, because by the end, you'll see castles in a whole new light, and I'll share a jaw-dropping fact about one castle that even seasoned historians debate. Let's step back into the Middle Ages and uncover the genius behind these legendary strongholds. Picture yourself in 12th century England, standing before a castle's massive walls. The air is thick with tension. Knights sharpen their swords, and the ground trembles under the weight of siege engines. But here's the thing, no matter how fierce the army, most castles didn't fall. Why? It all starts with their design, crafted to outsmart even the cleverest invaders. These weren't just buildings, they were psychological and tactical masterpieces. Let's break it down, and I want to hear in the comments, which castle do you think was the toughest to crack? First, let's talk location. Castle builders were obsessed with choosing the perfect spot. Think of a fortress perched on a rocky cliff, like Edinburgh Castle in Scotland, its walls blending into the crags below. Attackers had to climb steep slopes just to reach the gate, often under a rain of arrows. Or consider Dover Castle, hugging the cliffs of southeast England, with the sea as a natural barrier. These locations weren't random. They were chosen to make invaders' lives miserable. Rivers, mountains, or marshes often surrounded castles, forcing armies to navigate treacherous terrain. Imagine trying to drag a 10-ton trebuchet through a swamp while archers pick off your men. Good luck. Builders also used elevation to their advantage, placing castles on hills to give defenders a clear view of approaching enemies. This wasn't just defense, it was a statement. You're not getting in. What's a castle near you that uses its landscape like this? Drop it in the comments. I'm curious. Now let's zoom in on the walls themselves. Medieval castle. Walls weren't like the brick walls of your house. They were monsters, often 10 to 20 feet thick and up to 40 feet high. Take Crac des Chevaliers in Syria, a crusader castle so formidable it's still standing strong after 800 years. These walls were built with layers, a core of rubble and mortar sandwiched between cut stone, making them flexible enough to absorb the shock of battering rams. But here's the kicker. Walls weren't just tall, they were smart. Rounded towers jutted out at intervals, letting archers fire at attackers from multiple angles. No blind spots, no mercy. And those towers, they weren't just for show. If enemies breached the outer wall, defenders could retreat to the towers, turning each one into a mini fortress. It was like trying to win a game where the rules kept changing against you. Ever thought about how you'd attack a castle like that? Share your strategy below. But walls were only half the story. Let's walk through a castle's gatehouse, the most dangerous doorway in the Middle Ages. Gatehouses were death traps by design. You'd face a narrow passage lined with murder holes in the ceiling, where defenders could pour boiling water, oil, or even quicklime, a chemical that burns on contact. Then came the portcullis, a heavy iron grate that could slam down in seconds, trapping invaders like rats. If you somehow survived that, you'd hit a second gate, often at a right angle, forcing your army into a bottleneck where archers could pick you off. The gatehouse of Caernarfon Castle in Wales, for example, had multiple portcullises and arrow slits, making it a gauntlet of doom. It's no wonder attackers often gave up before even reaching the inner courtyard. What's the craziest castle defense you've heard of? Let's hear it in the comments. As we move deeper into the castle, you might think the defenders just sat back and relaxed. Not quite. Castles were built for survival, designed to outlast even the longest sieges. Let's talk about the keep, the castle's heart. This was the last line of defense, a towering stronghold where the lord and his retinue could hold out for months. Keeps like the one at Rochester Castle in England were stocked with food, water, and weapons, often with wells dug deep into the bedrock. During the siege of Rochester in 1215, King John's forces battered the walls for weeks, but the defenders held firm inside the keep, even after part of it collapsed. Castles also had hidden tunnels or sally ports for secret escapes or surprise attacks. Imagine being an attacker, thinking you've got the castle surrounded, only to find a squad of knights charging out of a hidden door. That's the kind of ingenuity that made castles so tough. Any siege stories you love, drop them below. Now let's shift gears to the human element. Castles weren't just stone. They were powered by people who knew how to use them. A small garrison of trained soldiers could hold off an army 10 times their size. Why? Because every part of the castle was a weapon. Archers on the battlements could fire hundreds of arrows per minute, turning the ground below into a pincushion. Meanwhile, engineers inside operated mangonels, catapults that hurled stones or even flaming pitch at attackers. During the siege of Kenilworth Castle in 1266, defenders used these machines to devastating effect, keeping the enemy at bay for 6 months. And don't forget the psychological warfare. Castles were designed to intimidate, their towering walls, and grim defenses sapping the morale of any army foolish enough to approach. Imagine staring up at those walls, knowing you'd have to climb them under fire. Would you have the guts to try? Tell me in the comments, but here's where it gets really interesting. Castles evolved. As siege technology advanced, so did castle design. By the 13th century, gunpowder was starting to appear in Europe and builders had to adapt. Concentric castles like Beaumaris in Wales took things to a new level. These had multiple rings of walls, each higher than the last, so defenders could keep firing even if the outer wall fell. The inner walls were often studded with enfilading towers, designed to create crossfire zones that shredded attackers. Beaumaris was so advanced it was never fully tested in battle. Attackers took one look and decided it wasn't worth it. This evolution shows how medieval engineers weren't just building for their time, they were thinking ahead. What's a modern building you think could stand up to a medieval siege? Share your thoughts below. Let's take a moment to appreciate the craftsmanship behind these fortresses. Building a castle wasn't just a construction project, it was a decades-long labor of love. Thousands of workers, masons, carpenters, and laborers hauled stone, carved intricate designs, and risked their lives to create these masterpieces. A castle like Château de Pierrefonds in France, with its soaring towers and detailed gargoyles, shows the artistry involved. But it wasn't just about beauty. Every stone was placed with defense in mind, from sloped walls that deflected catapult shots to narrow windows that let archers fire while staying protected. This blend of form and function is why castles still capture our imagination today. Ever visited a castle and felt its history? Tell me about it in the comments. Now you might be wondering, were castles really unbreakable? Well, not always. A determined attacker with enough time, resources, and cunning could sometimes win. Starvation was the biggest threat. Cut off a castle's supplies, and even the strongest walls couldn't save it. The siege of Château Gaillard in 1204, for example, ended when the defenders ran out of food after months of blockade. But here's the thing. Even when castles fell, it was rarely because of a direct assault. Mining, digging tunnels to collapse walls, or treachery like bribing a guard were often the only ways in. This just proves how formidable these fortresses were. Direct attacks, almost always a disaster. What's a famous castle siege you want to know more about? Let me know below. As we near the end, let's reflect on why castles matter. They weren't just military machines. They were symbols of power, shaping medieval society. Kings and lords used them to control land, collect taxes, and project authority. But they also fostered communities. Villages grew around castles, markets thrived, and people found safety within their walls. Castles like Carcassonne in France became cultural hubs, their walls echoing with stories of knights, feasts, and betrayals. Today they're time capsules, drawing millions of visitors who walk their halls and feel the weight of history. For Americans, castles might seem like something out of a fairy tale, but they're a reminder of a world where survival depended on ingenuity and strength. What's the first thing you'd do if you owned a medieval castle? Drop it in the comments. Before we wrap up, here's that jaw-dropping fact I promised. Did you know that some historians believe Crac des Chevaliers, the ultimate crusader castle, was so well designed that it could have withstood modern artillery up to the 19th century? Its walls were so thick and its defenses so layered that even cannons struggled to make a dent. That's the kind of legacy these fortresses left behind. They weren't just built to last, they were built to dominate. So, what have we learned? Medieval castles were unbreakable because of their strategic locations, monstrous walls, deadly gatehouses, self-sufficient keeps, and the brilliant people who ran them. They evolved with the times, blending art and war into structures that still stand today. If you loved this dive into medieval fortresses, smash that like button and subscribe for more history adventures. And here's a teaser. Our next video will explore the shocking truth about medieval torture methods. Trust me, you won't believe what they came up with. Click the bell so you don't miss it, and tell me in the comments, what's your favorite castle and why? Let's keep the conversation going.